The skies darkened over the ancient world as Prophet Nuh stood alone, facing a community that had rejected him for centuries. After 950 years of preaching, his final plea echoed through empty streets. The massive ark, built by his own weathered hands, stood as a testament to unwavering faith amid relentless mockery. His family prepared in solemn silence, while outside, his people continued their festivities, blind to the impending catastrophe. As the first raindrops began to fall, Nuh faced his greatest test, watching those who refused salvation confront their fate. What would you do if you knew judgment was coming, but no one would listen? The worn prayer mat beneath Nuh's knees told a story 9 centuries in the making. Each frayed thread and smoothed surface bore witness to countless prostrations, a physical testament to unwavering devotion. In the pre-dawn darkness, Nuh's weathered hands trembled slightly as he completed his prayers, the weight of divine knowledge heavy upon his shoulders. 950 years, he whispered, his voice carrying the texture of time itself. Have I not delivered your message faithfully, my Lord? The cool morning air carried memories of his first revelation, that moment of divine clarity when a young man had been entrusted with humanity's spiritual salvation. He remembered the initial optimism, the certainty that people would recognize truth when presented with it. How naive that hope seemed now. Rising slowly, his joints protesting after hours of prayer, Nuh gazed toward the eastern horizon. No ordinary sunrise would greet the world today. The air felt different, heavier, charged with anticipation. Even the birds had fallen silent. Father, his son Shem appeared in the doorway, concern etched across his face. The animals have begun arriving, just as you said they would. Nuh nodded, a complex emotion passing across his features. Then it begins today. The people still mock us. Even now, they have always mocked, Nuh replied, folding his prayer mat with ceremonial care. Since before your grandfather's grandfather drew his first breath. Through the small window, dark clouds gathered in the distance, unusual for the season. Another sign, though, one the disbelievers would rationalize away until water filled their lungs. Nuh traced the calluses on his palms, earned through centuries of labor, building the massive vessel that would now serve its divine purpose. His body had aged, beard grown white, skin mapped with wrinkles, yet his spiritual resolve remained undiminished. I remember when you first told us of your calling, Shem said softly. Mother thought perhaps you had fallen ill with fever. A rare smile crossed Nuh's face. Your mother's faith grew stronger than most men's could ever hope to be. Outside, the household stirred to life. The final day of preparations had arrived after generations of waiting, provisions secured, living quarters prepared, the last seams sealed with pitch, everything according to divine specification. Nuh knelt once more upon his prayer mat, pressing his forehead to the ground in submission. Grant me strength for what must come, he prayed, for I take no pleasure in their destruction. The divine response came not as words, but as certainty, a renewed sense of purpose flowing through his aged frame. When he rose again, his movements were steadier, his gaze clearer. What troubles you, father? Asked Ham, another faithful son, entering with a water jug, that even now, with judgment at hand, I wish they would turn back. Nuh replied, 950 years of rejection, mockery, and persecution, yet still I would rejoice if even one more soul accepted guidance today. You embody mercy, just as you have preached it, Ham observed. I embody only what my Lord commanded. Nuh corrected gently. The ark stands as both warning and salvation. Those who reject it choose their fate. Through the doorway, Nuh could see the massive wooden structure that dominated the landscape. A vessel built far from any sea, the physical manifestation of faith, persisting against ridicule. Decades of labor had transformed divine blueprints into tangible salvation. In the distance, thunder rumbled. Not ordinary thunder, but something deeper, as though the foundations of the earth recognized what approached. The air grew thick with moisture and anticipation. Now carefully placed his prayer mat among the provisions already loaded onto the ark. This humble item, companion through centuries of devotion, would witness humanity's rebirth just as it had witnessed its descent. "It is time," he said simply, turning toward the door. "I must make one final appeal." His sons exchanged glances, knowing what this meant. 950 years of rejection suggested what response their father would receive, yet his compassion remained undiminished. The first raindrops began to fall as Nuh stepped outside, gentle harbingers of catastrophic judgment. The final day had dawned, though few would live to see it end. The wooden hammer rested heavily in Nuh's hand, its handle smooth from centuries of use. This simple tool had driven the first nail into the ark's frame, and would now drive the last. As he positioned the final bronze nail against the reinforced hull, memories flooded through him like the waters soon to come. "Father, the western section is secured," called Japheth, his youngest son, wiping sweat from his brow despite the unusual coolness of the day. Nuh nodded, studying the massive vessel that dominated the landscape. Built upon dry land far from any sea, the ark stood as physical testimony to faith, persisting against ridicule. 3 levels high, crafted of resinous wood sealed with pitch, every dimension, every detail specified by divine instruction. "Remember when we began?" Nuh asked, striking the nail with practiced precision. "You were not yet born. Your brother Shem was just a boy." "You've told us how they laughed," Japheth replied, handing his father a length of rope. "A ship in the desert, built by a madman." "Not just a madman," Nuh corrected, with the ghost of a smile, "but a madman who refused to die, generation after generation, still building his impossible boat." The irony hung heavy between them. 9 centuries of steadfast construction had given the mockers ample opportunity to recognize the miracle of Nuh's longevity, itself evidence of his prophethood. Yet their hearts remained sealed tighter than the ark's hull. In the distance, strange clouds massed on the horizon. Not the familiar patterns that occasionally brought gentle rains to nourish crops, but something darker, more ominous. The air felt charged with anticipation. "The provisions are nearly loaded," reported Shem, approaching with the inventory scroll. "Grain, dried fruits, water, enough for many months." Nuh ran his hand along the ark's wooden flank. "It will be enough." A small group of believers, painfully small after centuries of preaching, worked efficiently nearby, loading the last essential supplies. Mostly poor, mostly considered insignificant by the community's standards. They had recognized truth while the wealthy and powerful remained blind. "Pairs of every animal as commanded," Ham confirmed, joining his father and brothers. They arrived with each passing hour, as though summoned by an unseen force. "Not unseen," Nuh corrected gently. "The same force that has guided this vessel's construction." The wooden hammer struck again, the sound echoing with finality. The last nail driven, the last seam sealed. Construction complete, after centuries of labor. Across the valley, the wealthy city continued its business, markets bustling with activity. Occasionally groups would journey to the hillside to mock the ongoing construction, a form of entertainment that had persisted across generations. Children learned to ridicule the old prophet from their parents, who had learned from theirs. "I see the elders have gathered to witness our final preparations," Shem observed, nodding toward a group of richly dressed men watching from a distance. "Perhaps they finally believe?" Japheth suggested hopefully. Nuh shook his head, setting down the wooden hammer carefully atop a nearby supply crate. "And oh, come to mock one final time." Even as the skies darkened, a younger believer approached, bowing respectfully. "Prophet of God, strange winds bring unusual birds from the north. Animals from the forest edge approach in pairs, just as you foretold." Nuh thanked him, then turned to his sons. "The time for construction has ended. Now we prepare to preserve what will remain of life upon the earth." He lifted the wooden hammer once more, studying its worn surface. This simple tool had helped translate divine commandment into physical salvation. From the first nail to the last, it connected 9 centuries of perseverance. Place it with the sacred items, he instructed Ham. Future generations should remember how faith built salvation, one nail at a time. As if responding to the completion of the ark, distant thunder rumbled across the valley. Not ordinary thunder, but something deeper, more significant. The sound of approaching judgment. Father, look. Ham pointed toward the hillside where animals appeared in pairs. Creatures that normally avoided human settlement now approached with purpose, heading directly toward the ark. The unbelievers will see this miracle and still deny, Nuh observed sadly, watching gazelles, foxes, and birds of prey approach without their natural enmity. Their blindness is not of the eyes, but of the heart. The wooden hammer, now relieved of its centuries-long purpose, was carefully stored among the provisions, its work complete, like the prophet who had wielded it, waiting now only for the waters that would soon transform a desert prophet into history's first sailor. Make ready, Nuh instructed his small congregation. Tomorrow, we enter the ark. Today, I make one final appeal to those who have rejected truth for 950 years. The first drops of rain began to fall as he spoke, gentle harbingers of catastrophic judgment soon to come. The marketplace bustled with activity, seemingly oblivious to the darkening skies above. Merchants haggled over prices, artisans displayed their crafts, and gossip flowed as freely as the wine in taverns. A leather-bound market scroll lay open on a merchant's table, meticulously recording the day's transactions. Business as usual, despite the impending catastrophe. Nuh moved through the crowded streets, his presence drawing stares and whispers. After 9 centuries, he had become a fixture in their community, the madman prophet whose warnings had spanned generations. Behold, the shipbuilder graces us with his presence, called a wealthy cloth merchant, prompting laughter from his customers. Tell us, prophet of doom, has your flood arrived yet? My grandfather's grandfather died waiting. More laughter, cruel and dismissive. Nuh paused, studying the man's face. The merchant's grandfather had indeed mocked him, in the same spot, centuries earlier. The waters come today, Nuh replied, his voice calm but carrying across the marketplace. The signs are clear for those willing to see. The animals gather, the skies darken with unfamiliar clouds. Animals always seek shelter before storms, dismissed a spice seller. We welcome the rain for our crops. Not this rain, Nuh countered. This is the judgment long promised. There remains time, though precious little, to turn back to faith and find sanctuary. The market scroll's keeper, an elderly record keeper, looked up from his notations. 950 years of the same warning, yet we prosper still. Our markets grow, our wealth increases. Where is this divine punishment you've promised since my ancestors' time? Nuh approached the record keeper's table, pointing to the market scroll. Your records show prosperity, yet they fail to account for the moral poverty that has overtaken this people. You count coins while souls diminish. A few people paused, momentarily contemplative. Nuh had always spoken with conviction, but today his words carried a different weight, an urgency that penetrated even habitual dismissal. Malik, Nuh addressed the record keeper directly. You once asked thoughtful questions about the Creator. Your heart was not always hardened. Will you not reconsider, even now? The elderly man's expression wavered. Decades ago, he had indeed engaged with Nuh's teachings before social pressure drove him back to conformity. I have a position to maintain, he muttered, returning to his market scroll. My records must be completed. And so they shall be, Nuh replied softly. Today's records will be your last. A rumble of thunder punctuated his words, causing several merchants to glance nervously skyward. The clouds had grown darker, more ominous. Your prophet brings storm clouds to intimidate us, shouted someone from the crowd, a natural phenomenon twisted to serve his delusions. Nuh turned, addressing the gathering crowd. I bring nothing. I merely warn of what approaches. The ark stands complete upon the hillside, a final opportunity for salvation. Any who would be saved must come before the waters rise. We've seen floods before, scoffed a grain merchant, though his eyes betrayed uncertainty as he studied the unusual cloud formations. The river overflows its banks every few decades. We rebuild not this flood, Nuh said, his voice heavy with foreknowledge. The waters that come will leave nothing to rebuild. A young woman pushed forward, clutching a child. My husband laughs at your warnings, Prophet, but the animals behave strangely today. Even our household cat fled toward the hills. Hush, Sophia, an older woman pulled her back. Would you have people think our family harbors sympathies for this madman? I would have your family saved, Nuh replied gently. Bring your children to the ark. Before nightfall, the choice remains yours, though time grows short. The market record keeper looked down at his scroll, quill hovering indecisively over the parchment. Centuries of transactions recorded meticulously, the mundane details of commerce preserved, while spiritual warnings went unheeded. A merchant approached, presenting goods for record. The usual terms, Malik. Payable after the harvest. Malik hesitated, glancing from his market scroll to the darkening sky. There will be no harvest, he whispered, so quietly that only Nuh heard him. The truth touches your heart, even now, Nuh said softly. It is not too late. But the record keeper shook his head, dipping his quill and recording the transaction. I have kept these records for 60 years. I cannot abandon my duty based on signs in the sky. Nuh placed a weathered hand on the market scroll. Your most important record would be your presence on the ark when the waters come. As if summoned by his words, the first heavy raindrops began to fall, spattering the ink on the open market scroll. Divine judgment beginning to erase human record. The elder's staff struck the ground with authority, its polished cedar surface worn smooth by generations of use. Adorned with intricate carvings representing the community's ancestral deities, the staff symbolized not just leadership, but resistance to Nuh's monotheistic message. Your final warning has been delivered and rejected, Prophet declared Chief Elder Canaan, flanked by the tribal council gathered in the community's central meeting place. Rain began falling more steadily now, prompting several elders to glance nervously at the darkening sky. 950 years we have endured your pronouncements, continued Canaan, leaning heavily on his ornate staff. 950 years of prosperity have proven you false. Nuh stood before the council, dignified despite the rain dampening his robes. The longevity granted me to deliver this message stands as its own sign. Which among you has witnessed a man live centuries unchanged while generations pass like seasons? An uncomfortable silence followed. This inconsistency in their rejection had always been their weakest point. How they explained away Nuh's supernatural lifespan while denying his divine message. Our forefathers taught that you employ magicians' tricks, offered one elder hesitantly. Potions and enchantments to preserve youth. For 9 centuries, Nuh questioned softly. Have your magicians replicated such feats? Have any who sought my secrets discovered them? Chief Canaan struck his staff against the ground again, drawing attention back to himself. We have not assembled to debate your longevity, but to address the panic you spread with talks of floods and divine punishment. I speak only what has been revealed, Nuh replied calmly. The same message I delivered to your ancestors long before your birth, and we maintain the same answer they gave, retorted Canaan. Our gods have protected this valley since time immemorial. Your invisible deity holds no power here. Several elders nodded in agreement, though their expressions betrayed growing uncertainty as thunder rumbled overhead. The rainfall intensified, unusual for the season and region. Your carved idols and ancestral totems cannot save you from what comes, Nuh warned, gesturing toward the distant hillside where the massive ark stood, complete. The Creator of all things has decreed judgment for the corruption that infests this land. An elder named Jebril, slightly younger than the others, stepped forward. Prophet, help us understand. If your God is merciful as you claim, why destroy innocent children alongside the guilty? After centuries of warnings, none can claim innocence through ignorance. Nuh answered sadly. As for the children, they return to their Creator's mercy while this corrupt society can no longer contaminate their spirits. Chief Canaan raised his staff, pointing it accusingly at Nuh. You speak of corruption while advocating genocide. How dare you claim moral authority? I advocate nothing, Nuh replied. I merely warn of what has been decreed. Even now, salvation remains possible for any who would board the ark before nightfall. Laughter erupted among several elders, though it sounded hollow against the increasing rainfall. Your followers consist of servants, laborers, and social outcasts, scoffed another elder. Would you have us, the respected leaders of this community, join such company? Abandon our positions to huddle in your wooden vessel. Status holds no meaning before divine judgment, Nuh answered. On the ark, all are equal in their submission to the Creator. Chief Canaan's knuckles whitened around his staff. Enough. For centuries you have undermined our traditions, questioned our gods, and challenged our authority. We have shown remarkable patience with your delusion, and I have shown patience with your rejection, Nuh countered, returning generation after generation with the same opportunity for salvation. As if responding to the escalating confrontation, a brilliant flash of lightning split the sky, followed immediately by deafening thunder. Several elders flinched visibly. Coincidental timing, muttered Chief Canaan, though uncertainty tinged his voice. A fortunate natural occurrence to punctuate your threats. A young messenger rushed into the council circle, drenched from the increasingly heavy rainfall. Elder, strange reports from the outer farmlands, animals fleeing toward higher ground, birds flying in unusual patterns, and the river rises rapidly, already beyond its banks. Murmurs of concern spread among the council. Chief Canaan struck his staff against the ground repeatedly, demanding order. A seasonal storm, nothing more. Return to your homes, secure your valuables against flooding. This will pass like every other deluge. Nuh looked upon the assembled elders with profound sadness. 950 years I have walked among your people. I have witnessed your births, celebrated your marriages, mourned your deaths, only to see the same patterns repeated in your children and their children after them. My time among you ends today. Without waiting for dismissal, Nuh turned and began walking toward the distant hillside, where the ark awaited. Behind him, the elder's staff struck the muddy ground one final time, the sound nearly drowned out by the intensifying storm. Laughter and music spilled from the great hall where celebrations reached their peak. A golden wedding goblet, passed down through generations of nobility, caught the torchlight as it moved from hand to hand. Guests drinking deeply despite the strengthening storm outside. A toast to the bride and groom, called out a jubilant elder, raising the ornate cup. May your union be blessed with prosperity and many children. The crowd cheered their agreement, seemingly oblivious to the rumbling thunder that punctuated their revelry. This wedding, uniting two prestigious families, had been planned for months, and neither prophecies of doom nor unusual weather would dampen their festivities. Nuh stood at the entrance, water dripping from his robes. The contrast was stark. Joy and celebration inside, impending catastrophe outside. Several guests noticed his arrival, their expressions hardening. The prophet of doom graces us with his presence, announced the father of the groom loudly. Come to warn us again, old man. Conversations quieted as attention turned toward Nuh. The ancient prophet walked forward slowly, his eyes scanning the gathered crowd. People he had known across multiple generations, families he had watched rise and fall through centuries. I come with the same warning I have always brought, Nuh replied, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent hall. But today the warning ends. The waters have begun to rise. The golden wedding goblet paused in its circuit, held uncertainly by a guest. Outside, the rainfall intensified, drumming against the roof with unnatural force. "Would you ruin this joyous occasion with your madness?" demanded the bride's father. "For 9 centuries you have promised destruction that never comes." "Because the Creator is patient, allowing every opportunity for repentance," Nuh answered calmly. "That patience ends today. Any who would be saved must come to the ark before nightfall." A young man pushed through the crowd. Nuh's own son, who had rejected his father's message. Handsome and well-connected, he had long ago chosen status among disbelievers over faith with the ostracized. "Father," he said, his voice tinged with embarrassment and frustration, "you embarrass yourself and me with these continued delusions. Look around. The finest families celebrate while you speak of destruction." Nuh regarded his son with profound sadness. "My son, even now you could join us. Your brothers prepare the ark. Your place remains reserved." Laughter rippled through the crowd at this exchange. Someone called out, "Even his own son recognizes his madness." Nuh took the golden wedding goblet from a nearby guest, raising it high. "I drink to reality, Father, to life continuing as it always has." He drank deeply, then handed the goblet to his father in mock offering. Nuh made no move to take it. "The choice remains yours, as it always has. I cannot force salvation upon any soul, even my beloved son." The bride, adorned in elaborate finery, stepped forward hesitantly. Unlike the others, concern showed clearly on her young face. "Prophet, my grandmother spoke of you visiting her grandmother with the same warning. How can one man live so long?" "Through divine will," Nuh answered simply. "The same will that sends the floods, which even now begin to consume the lowlands." Her expression wavered momentarily before her new husband pulled her back. "Pay no attention to his nonsense, my love. This madman has haunted our community for generations with the same tired predictions." Outside, a brilliant flash of lightning illuminated the hall through its windows, followed immediately by deafening thunder. Several guests jumped, wine spilling onto fine garments. "A storm approaches, nothing more," announced the father of the groom confidently, though his eyes betrayed uncertainty. "Continue the celebrations." Musicians resumed playing, though their tempo seemed hurried, anxious. The golden wedding goblet continued its circuit, but guests drank more from nervous energy than festive spirit. "The ark stands ready upon the hillside," Nuh projected over the resumed noise. "Any who would seek salvation have only to walk through its door before the great waters come." "And abandon our homes, our possessions," challenged the bride's father. "For what? To live in your wooden box with animals?" "To preserve life itself," Nuh replied simply. "What value have possessions beneath the waters?" A servant burst into the hall, drenched and breathing heavily. "The river overflows its banks at unprecedented speed. The lower fields are already submerged." Momentary silence fell across the gathering. The golden wedding goblet froze midway to someone's lips. "Seasonal flooding," the groom's father declared, though doubt had crept into his voice. "It happens every few decades. Not like this," the servant insisted. "Elders say they've never seen waters rise so rapidly." Nuh looked one last time at his son, standing proudly among the elite who had rejected divine guidance for generations. The golden wedding goblet gleamed in the torchlight, a symbol of celebration on the eve of destruction. "I have delivered my final warning," Nuh said quietly. "May the Creator have mercy on your soul." As he turned to leave, the torrential rain outside suddenly redoubled, the sound like stones striking the roof. The golden wedding goblet slipped from nervous fingers, wine spilling across the floor like blood, a final libation before judgment. Rain streamed down the small dwelling's walls as Nuh entered, his eyes immediately finding the clay tablet displayed prominently on the central table. The family portrait, crafted decades ago by a skilled artisan, depicted Nuh with his entire family, including those who had chosen disbelief over salvation. His fingers traced the etched features of his son Nam, pain evident in his expression. "He will not come," Nuh said quietly to his wife, who was gathering final provisions. Nama paused in her work, her aged face reflecting a mother's anguish. "Even now, with the waters rising, his pride has become a wall stronger than the ark itself," Nuh replied, carefully setting down the family portrait. "9 centuries I have lived among these people, yet the hardest rejection comes from my own blood." Outside, the rain intensified, no longer the gentle, life-giving water that nourished crops, but something heavier, ominous, divine judgment beginning to manifest. "I saw him at the wedding celebration," Nuh continued, helping his wife pack dried fruits into a sealed container, "standing proudly among those who have mocked our faith for generations. Perhaps when he sees the true flood beginning, he will change his mind," Nana suggested, though her tone lacked conviction. Shem entered, water dripping from his cloak. "Father, the lower valley already floods. People flee to higher ground, yet still they refuse to approach the ark. And your brother," Shem's expression provided answer enough. "He laughed when I approached him, said he would rather drown with dignity than live with madness." Nuh closed his eyes briefly, absorbing this fresh pain. His choice was made long ago. We must respect it, even as we grieve. Ham appeared in the doorway, anxiety clear on his face. "Mother, father," the animals crowd around the ark entrance. More arrive with each passing moment. "We must board soon or risk being unable to manage them." "Has Wayla returned?" Nama asked, referring to their daughter-in-law. "She helps Yafith secure the upper deck," Ham confirmed. "All believing women assist with final preparations." Thunder shook the small dwelling, rattling the family portrait on its stand. The divine timeline accelerated with each passing moment. "I must make one final attempt," No decided, picking up the clay portrait carefully. "Not for Nam alone, but for his mother's heart. Husband, the time grows short," Nama cautioned, though hope flickered in her eyes. "I have waited 9 centuries for their repentance," No replied gently. "I can spare a few more moments for my son." The family gathered their final possessions, preparing to leave their home for the last time. Generations had been born and died in this modest dwelling, while No continued his prophetic mission. Now its walls would soon dissolve beneath unprecedented waters. "Take these to the ark," No instructed, handing packed provisions to his sons. "I will follow shortly." "Father, be careful," Shem warned. "The people grow desperate as the waters rise. Some speak of destroying the ark rather than seeing you proved right. Their hearts are already set," No replied sadly. "But I must offer salvation until the final moment." Clutching the family portrait, No made his way through the increasingly violent storm toward the home his unbelieving son shared with his unbelieving wife. Wind lashed rain against his face, yet he pressed forward with the determination that had sustained him through centuries of rejection. Nome's dwelling stood dark when he arrived, water already pooling around its foundations. "Nome's son," he called out, his voice nearly lost in the howling wind. The door opened, revealing not his son but his daughter-in-law, Wara. Her expression hardened upon seeing him. "He isn't here." He joined others, securing the village against what they call your seasonal flooding. "Wara, please," No held out the family portrait. "The waters that come cannot be stopped by any earthly barrier. Join us on the ark. There remains space." She laughed bitterly. 900 years of the same warning. How convenient that judgment comes precisely when your ship is completed. "Not convenience, but divine timing," No corrected gently. "Your disbelief cannot stop what comes, but it can prevent your salvation." Lightning illuminated her scornful expression. "My husband was right to reject you. Your manipulations divided our family across generations. Truth often divides," No acknowledged sadly. "I cannot force faith upon unwilling hearts." He placed the family portrait in her hands. Keep this. Perhaps in your final moments, you will recognize what was freely offered. Thunder crashed overhead as Noah turned away, his ancient heart heavy with the knowledge that part of his family had chosen destruction. The clay portrait, capturing a family united in image but divided in faith, would soon dissolve beneath the flood waters, much like the civilization that had rejected divine guidance for centuries. As he trudged up the hillside toward the waiting ark, Noah allowed himself one backward glance at the community he had tried to save for 9.5 centuries. Even now, with water rising visibly in the streets, they continued their denial, some fleeing to higher ground, others attempting to reinforce structures, none approaching the wooden vessel of salvation. "It is time," he whispered, as much to himself as to the Creator who had entrusted him with this mission. "I have delivered your message faithfully. The rest lies in your hand." The scholar's scroll unfurled across the stone table, its carefully preserved parchment covered with astronomical calculations and natural observations spanning centuries. Around it gathered the community's most learned minds, philosophers, mathematicians and natural historians, summoned for emergency council as the unusual storm intensified. "The prophet's warnings contradict everything we understand about natural law," stated Cadmiel, the eldest scholar, his finger tracing rainfall patterns documented across generations. "No atmospheric conditions could possibly produce enough water to submerge our entire valley, let alone the world." Noah stood silently at the chamber's edge, invited not out of respect, but as the subject of their scientific dismissal. Water pooled around his sandals, having followed him into this chamber supposedly secure from the elements. "Consider the evidence," continued another scholar, unrolling his own documents. "In 3 centuries of meteorological observation, the highest recorded rainfall produced flooding, reaching only the lower market. No claims waters will overtop the highest mountains. Mathematically impossible given our atmospheric understanding." Thunder rattled the scholars' instruments, as if challenging their calculations. The rain's intensity had doubled even in the short time since their gathering began. "Your understanding remains limited," Noah finally spoke, his voice cutting through their technical discussion. "The waters come not just from above, but from below. The foundations of the earth will open to release the deep." Cadmiel scoffed, tapping the scroll emphatically. "Mystical nonsense without scientific basis. Water cannot spontaneously generate from beneath the earth in such volumes. The Creator who formed the waters can command them." Noah replied simply. "Your scrolls document the visible world while remaining blind to its author." A younger scholar named Jared looked up from the rainfall calculations, his expression troubled. "Even accounting for unprecedented precipitation, we've never recorded anything approaching what would be needed for a global deluge, yet this current storm already exceeds our historical records." "Outlier events occur in any natural system," dismissed Cadmiel, though uncertainty tinged his voice as water began seeping more visibly under the chamber door. "Statistical anomalies, nothing more. 950 years I have walked among you," Noah reminded them. "Is my longevity also a statistical anomaly? Or does it suggest forces beyond your scroll's calculations?" Uncomfortable silence followed. The scholars had long explained away Noah's supernatural lifespan through various theories, from mistaken record-keeping to exaggerated oral traditions, yet none had satisfactorily resolved this contradiction in their rejection. "Even if we granted your divine claims," argued another scholar, "a merciful deity would not destroy innocent children alongside the guilty. The moral calculation proves your prophecy false. After centuries of warnings, none remain innocent through ignorance." No answer. "As for the children, they return to their Creator's mercy, while society can no longer corrupt their spirits." Cadmiel rolled his scroll tightly, as if physically rejecting Noah's arguments. "Your claim violates fundamental principles of water volume and atmospheric capacity. We calculate Earth's atmosphere cannot physically hold sufficient water for such a deluge. Your calculations measure ordinary rainfall," Noah countered. "What comes is divine judgment, not a natural phenomenon." A servant burst into the chamber, his clothes drenched. "Master, the river has overflowed completely. Waters rise through the streets faster than people can retreat." The scholars exchanged troubled glances. Their scrolls predicted seasonal flooding, but nothing approaching this magnitude. Localized river flooding, Cadmelets insisted, though his voice wavered. The mountain watersheds likely received exceptional rainfall. "All watersheds simultaneously?" questioned Jared softly. "The mathematical improbability." "Enough," snapped Cadmel. "We will not abandon centuries of knowledge for superstition." Nah approached the stone table, looking down at the scholar's scroll with its precise measurements and predictions. Human knowledge, confronting divine revelation. "Your wisdom documents what was but fails to comprehend what comes. The ark stands ready upon the hillside. Any who would be saved must board before the great waters consume all. And abandon our knowledge, our accumulated wisdom?" Cadmel clutched his scroll protectively. Better to face death with dignity and reason than survive through superstitious fear. Water now flowed freely under the chamber door, pooling around their feet. Several younger scholars glanced nervously toward the exit. "Knowledge without wisdom leads to precisely this moment," Nah observed sadly. "Measuring the world while denying its maker." Jared stepped forward hesitantly. "Prophet, if hypothetically your warnings prove true, what happens to our knowledge, our discoveries and observations?" "Lost beneath the waters," Nah replied honestly. "A new world begins with those who respected the Creator above their own understanding." Cadmiel rolled his precious scroll into a waterproof casing, his hands trembling slightly. "I have documented natural patterns for 70 years. I cannot abandon empirical truth for mystical claim." "The choice remains yours," Nah said, turning toward the door as water rose around their ankles. "But know that what your scrolls cannot explain is even now surrounding you." As if punctuating his words, a tremendous crack of thunder shook the building's foundation, causing several scholars to stumble. The rain's intensity reached deafening levels, drowning out further debate. Nah paused at the threshold, watching the scholars clutching their precious documents as water inexorably rose. Knowledge confronting revelation, calculation facing judgment. The scholar's scroll, with all its careful observations, would soon dissolve in the very phenomenon it claimed impossible. A small wooden toy boat bobbed in a rain puddle, pushed by tiny hands as children played, oblivious to the storm's ominous significance. Nah paused on his journey back to the ark, watching the children's innocent game with profound sadness. How fitting that their play mimicked the very salvation they would need. "Look, the boatman," called one child, noticing Nah standing nearby. Unlike the adults who met him with mockery or hostility, the children regarded him with curiosity untainted by prejudice. "Does your boat float too?" asked a small boy named Tamar, holding up his wooden toy. Lovingly carved and painted with simple patterns, the child's toy bore an uncanny resemblance to the massive ark on the hillside. "It does," Nah answered gently, kneeling despite his ancient bones protesting the movement. "And it will carry those who believe to safety. Like in your stories?" Another child joined them, eyes wide with wonder rather than skepticism. "With all the animals together?" "Precisely like that," Nah confirmed, examining the toy boat with appropriate seriousness. "Your craft shows excellent craftsmanship. My grandfather made it," Tamar explained proudly. "Before he died, he told me your stories. He said someday the waters would come just as you warned." Nah's eyebrows rose slightly. "Your grandfather believed." "He said he was too afraid to show it," the boy admitted, lowering his voice. "But he told me to listen when the animals started acting strangely." Before Nah could respond, an anxious woman rushed forward, pulling Tamar away. "Stay away from my son," she hissed at Nah. "Would you fill his head with your frightening predictions?" "I share only the truth," Nah replied calmly. "Children often recognize it more readily than adults." "Mama, the animals are behaving oddly, just like grandfather said they would before." "Enough," the woman cut off her son's observation. Your grandfather was becoming senile. There is no flood coming beyond a heavy seasonal rain. Other parents quickly gathered their children, forming a protective barrier between them and the ancient prophet. The rain continued intensifying, already ankle-deep in the play area. The waters rise more rapidly than any seasonal rain, Nuh observed, gesturing toward the flooded streets below. The ark stands ready upon the hillside. Bring your children to safety while time remains, and subject them to ridicule, challenged another parent. Have them live as social outcasts, like your followers. Better outcast than drowned, Nuh replied simply. A girl of perhaps 7 years slipped past her mother's restraining hand, approaching Nuh with innocent directness. Prophet, why would God drown children? My teacher says a loving God wouldn't hurt innocent people. The question, asked without the defensive hostility of adults, struck straight to the theological heart of the matter. Parents tensed, awaiting his response. Child, Nuh answered gently, the Creator loves the innocent most tenderly of all. Those too young for moral choice return directly to divine mercy, while the corruption that would twist their spirits is washed away. That's enough. The girl's father pulled her back roughly. Stop poisoning our children with your morbid fantasies. Nuh rose slowly to his feet, water now reaching mid-calf in the play area. 950 years I have warned this community. The Creator's patience allowed children to become parents, then grandparents, then dust, generation after generation, receiving the same warning. None can claim they weren't given time to change. Tama clutched his toy boat tightly, conflict evident on his young face as he looked between his mother and the prophet. Mama, couldn't we just go see the big boat? Just to be safe? Listen to your son, Nuh urged softly. Children often perceive truth more clearly than those blinded by pride. Our children need protection from prophets of doom, not from rain, declared another father firmly. Come all of you, we'll wait out this storm in the meeting hall on higher ground. As the parents herded their children away, Tama glanced back at Nuh, genuine fear in his eye. He raised his small wooden toy boat questioningly. It would need to be much bigger to save you, Nuh called to him gently. The real ark awaits on the hillside. Enough. Tama's mother pushed her son forward forcefully. The meeting hall has withstood every flood in living memory, but not in mine, Nuh murmured too quietly for them to hear. Little Tama broke away suddenly, splashing through deepening water back to Nuh. Before his mother could reclaim him, he pressed the wooden toy boat into the prophet's weathered hands. Take it, the boy whispered urgently, for luck on your big boat. Nuh accepted the gift with appropriate solemnity. Thank you, child. Perhaps. Tama. His mother snatched him back, glaring venomously at Nuh. Stay away from my son, old man. As the families retreated toward what they believed was safer ground, Nuh examined the small toy boat in his hands. Crafted with simple tools but genuine care, it represented the pure faith children naturally possessed before adults, taught them cynicism and disbelief. Thunder boomed overhead as the divine timeline accelerated. The rain now fell in sheets rather than drops, obscuring visibility beyond a few paces. Nuh carefully tucked the child's toy into his robe, protecting this small artifact of innocence. The most innocent will return to you directly, he prayed quietly, resuming his journey toward the ark. May your mercy receive them tenderly. The wooden toy boat, a child's innocent echo of divine instruction, would be preserved aboard the ark as waters claimed the civilization that had rejected its salvation for centuries. The village well, normally a place of casual gathering and gossip, had become a scene of frantic activity. An empty water vessel sat discarded near its edge, its purpose rendered increasingly ironic as the heavens released unprecedented volumes of water upon the community. People rushed to fill containers, preparing for what they still believed would be a temporary inconvenience rather than civilization-ending catastrophe. Nuh stood silently watching the activity, his mere presence causing uneasy glances among the gathered villagers. After centuries as the community's prophet of doom, His appearance at this critical moment carried symbolic weight even the most hardened skeptics could feel. "Come to gloat, prophet," called out a middle-aged man, struggling to carry several filled water jugs. "A heavy storm validates your doomsaying. I take no pleasure in what comes," Nuh replied calmly, picking up the discarded empty vessel. "This will be the last time this well provides water to our community." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd, though it sounded hollow against the intensifying rainfall. The water level in the usually placid village square had already risen to mid-calm. "We have endured floods before," declared an elderly woman confidently, though her eyes tracked the rapidly rising water with growing concern. "The waters recede. Life continues. Not this flood," Nuh replied gently. "What begins now has no precedent in human memory, save in my warnings these 950 years. A younger man named Japheth, not Nuh's son but a distant cousin to the community's ruling family, paused in his water gathering, studying the ancient prophet with less hostility than the others. "Prophet, speak plainly. If you truly believe catastrophe approaches, what exactly do you predict?" The crowd quieted, many hearing underneath the question a note of genuine inquiry rather than mockery. Nuh set down the empty vessel and addressed them with the dignified gravity earned through centuries of prophecy. "Before this day ends, water will cover the highest rooftops of our community. By tomorrow, only the tallest trees will remain visible. Within 7 days, even the mountains surrounding our valley will disappear beneath the waters." Murmurs of disbelief spread through the crowd, yet their dismissals lacked their usual conviction as they stood in steadily deepening water under skies darker than any in living memory. "Impossible," someone declared, though uncertainty tinged the word. "There isn't enough water in the world to cover the mountains. The world contains more than you comprehend." Nuh responded, "The foundations of the deep will open. Water will come from below as well as above." As if responding to his words, the well beside them suddenly overflowed, water bubbling up unnaturally from its depths. Several people stepped back in alarm. "A coincidence," declared one elder, though fear had entered his eyes. "Underground springs responding to the rainfall. The signs multiply while denial persists," Nuh observed sadly. "The ark stands completed upon the hillside. Any who would be saved must board before nightfall, when the full force of judgment begins." Japheth took a step toward Nuh, genuine conflict visible on his face. "My family would never join me. My children, my wife. Bring them," Nuh urged gently. "There remains room, and live as outcasts, mocked as fools, who abandoned everything for a madman's warning. Better mocked than drowned," Nuh replied simply. "Pride offers poor comfort beneath the waters." Lightning split the sky with blinding brilliance, followed immediately by thunder that shook the very ground. The rainfall intensified again, now falling with such force that it stung exposed skin. The empty water vessel at Nuh's feet began floating in the rising floodwater. "This is unnatural," admitted a village elder, watching water bubbling up through cracks in the ground, precisely as Nuh had just described. "In 70 years, I've never seen a storm like this." "Because it is not merely a storm," Nuh explained. "It is judgment." Japheth looked toward his home on higher ground, visibly torn. "Prophet, how much time remains before, less with each passing moment?" Nuh answered, "The animals already gather at the ark. When they are secured, the door closes, by divine command rather than my hand." An older man shoved Japheth roughly. "Would you actually consider following this madman? After 9 centuries of failed prophecies, have they failed?" Japheth gestured toward the rapidly rising waters and unnatural darkness, or merely awaited their appointed time. The crowd's mood shifted perceptibly, fear displacing mockery as water reached their knees. The empty vessel now floated freely in what had become a swiftly moving current through the village square. "Those who seek safety must come now," Nuh announced, his voice carrying over the storm's roar. "I make my final journey to the ark. Any who would survive must follow." As Nuh turned to depart, Japheth took several steps after him, before hesitating, looking back at his community, at generations of belonging, at family who would reject his choice. "I cannot abandon them," he said finally, anguish in his voice. "Even to save myself." Noah nodded sadly, understanding the painful choice. "May the Creator judge you with mercy." The empty water vessel, now carried by the swiftly rising floodwaters, bumped against Japheth's legs, a silent reminder of the irony in preparing water containers amid a world-ending deluge. As Noah departed for the final time, several villagers watched him go with newfound uncertainty, the prophet's warning suddenly seeming less like madness and more like terrible truth too long ignored. The massive wooden gate standing at the ark's entrance had been crafted from ancient cedar, its surface treated with pitch and carved with subtle prayers of protection. For centuries, it had remained open during construction, an invitation and warning simultaneously. Now, as Noah approached his life's work for the final time, the open gate's symbolism weighed heavily upon him. "Father, the last of the birds have arrived," called Shem from the ark's upper deck. "Lions and their prey stand peacefully together in the lower holds." The scene before the ark defied natural order. Predators and prey approached in orderly pairs, instinctual enmity temporarily suspended by divine command. Creatures that normally avoided human habitation now moved purposefully toward the wooden vessel, guided by something beyond human comprehension. A small crowd had gathered at a distance to witness the spectacle, their expressions shifting from mockery to unease, as animals continued arriving in perfect pairs, just as Noah had prophesied for centuries. "What sorcery compels the beasts?" demanded one of the village elders, his voice barely audible over the intensifying storm. "Not sorcery, but divine command," Noah answered, supervising the orderly procession of animals up the loading ramp. "The same voice that warned you through my lips for 950 years now speaks through creation itself." A pair of wolves passed meekly between them, followed by foxes, hares, and creatures from distant lands some villagers had never seen before. All moved with purpose toward the waiting ark, while humans remained rooted in disbelief, despite water now reaching their knees. "This defies natural law," observed a scholar who had rejected Noah's warnings that very morning. "Predators do not walk peacefully with prey. Natural law bends to its author's will," Noah replied simply, directing smaller creatures toward designated areas within the ark. Just as waters now rise from both heaven and earth simultaneously, indeed the flood's progression had accelerated dramatically. What had begun as unusual rain now combined with water visibly seeping upward through the ground, creating currents that tugged at villagers' legs as they watched the extraordinary procession. Ham appeared at the gate, checking names against a manifest. "Father, we've received all species from the eastern lands. Only western creatures remain outstanding." As if summoned by his words, pairs of animals from western territories crested the hill. Camels, lions, bears, and countless smaller species moving in unnatural harmony toward salvation. The gathered crowd's mood shifted perceptibly, fear displacing mockery as the impossible spectacle unfolded before them. Several cast anxious glances toward the rapidly rising waters that now threatened the lower village. "Perhaps," began one man hesitantly, "perhaps we were wrong to dismiss." "There remains space," Noah announced, looking directly at the assembled villagers. "The Creator's mercy extends even to this final moment. Any who would be saved need only enter before the gate closed." An uncomfortable silence followed, broken only by thunder and the splashing of animals moving steadily into the ark. Centuries of ridiculing Noah had created a social barrier that even imminent death struggled to overcome. "I would be mocked forever if the waters recede," murmured one man, voicing the pride that constrained many despite the evidence before them. "There will be none remaining to mock you," Noah replied solemnly, "and if I prove false, you may execute me yourself when waters recede." A woman stepped forward tentatively, a small child clutched in her arms. "My daughter, would she be welcome? All who seek salvation may enter, Nuh confirmed gently. The woman took another hesitant step, then faltered as hostile murmurs rose from the crowd. The social pressure proved stronger than maternal instinct, and she retreated, clutching her child tightly. Japheth approached from within the ark, concern evident on his face. "Father, the last animals approach. Once they enter, we must seal the gate according to divine instruction." Nuh nodded gravely, then turned once more to the gathered villagers, people whose ancestors he had watched grow from infancy to old age, generation after generation rejecting the same warning. "9 centuries I have lived among you as a sign of divine patience," he declared, his voice carrying despite the storm's roar. "The same unnatural longevity that you dismissed now ends along with the civilization that rejected salvation. The gate remains open for any who would enter, but once divine command seals it, no human hand can open it again." The locked gate, soon to separate salvation from judgment, stood as the final threshold between 2 ages of human history. On one side, preservation of life. On the other, divine justice ending a civilization that had persisted in corruption despite centuries of warning. The choice remains yours, as it always has been. Nuh concluded, turning to supervise the final animal pairs entering. But time has run out. Several villagers glanced between the rising waters and the ark's entrance, conflict evident on their faces. A few took tentative steps forward before social pressure pulled them back. Pride, even facing extinction, proved stronger than survival instinct. As the last animal pairs entered, Ham approached his father with solemn expression. "All creatures accounted for according to divine instruction. The time has come." Nuh cast one final anguished look at the community he had tried to save for 9.5 centuries. "May the Creator have mercy on their souls." The massive wooden gate, the boundary between salvation and judgment, began swinging closed, not by human hands but by divine will. The locked gate would soon seal one chapter of human history and open another, with only 8 souls preserved, to begin anew. Darkness fell prematurely as storm clouds blotted out the sun, creating an unnatural twilight, despite the early hour. Inside the ark, Nuh's family worked methodically to light oil lanterns, each flame pushing back against the encroaching darkness. The ornate bronze lantern Nuh himself carried had been crafted centuries ago, its delicate filigree telling the story of creation in miniature metalwork. "Secure the lower deck lanterns with extra bindings," Nuh instructed, raising his light to inspect the ceiling beams. "Once waters lift the ark, we cannot risk fire." The ancient vessel creaked as violent winds battered its exterior. Through small ventilation ports, they could see the valley below where water had risen dramatically, already submerging the lower portions of the community. Desperate people waded through chest-high currents, abandoning possessions as they fled toward higher ground. "They still do not come to the ark," observed Nama sadly, securing provisions against the inevitable motion once they began to float. "Even now, with prophecy fulfilled before their eyes, pride becomes a drowning weight," Nuh replied, adjusting his lantern to better illuminate their work. 9 centuries they mocked our preparation. To acknowledge truth now requires admitting generations of error. Thunder shook the massive vessel, causing lantern flames to flicker momentarily. The animals in lower compartments grew restless, their instinctual fear of the storm temporarily overcoming the divine calm that had guided them aboard. "Father," Ham called from the upper observation deck, "the waters rise more rapidly now. The marketplace lies completely submerged." Shem appeared from the lower levels, his own lantern casting long shadows. "The animals are secured, though agitated. Some sense what approaches. They perceive divine judgment without human rationalization," Nuh observed, holding his lantern higher to check the integrity of the ceiling seams. "Nature recognizes its creator's voice while humanity remains willfully deaf." Outside, lightning illuminated the hillside in stark relief. Through the small windows, they could see people scrambling upward as floodwaters pursued them with unnatural speed. Some glanced toward the ark with new understanding in their expressions. comprehension arriving precisely when opportunity had passed. "They gather at our door," Japheth reported, peering through a small observation port, "demanding entrance now that waters confirm your warnings." Nuh closed his eyes briefly, 9 centuries of rejection culminating in this painful moment of vindication. The gate was sealed by divine command, not human hands. "We cannot open what the Creator has closed." The first impact struck the ark's hull, desperate fists pounding against wood that had been designed to withstand far greater pressures. Voices called Nuh's name, pleading for the salvation they had rejected throughout their lives. "Prophet, open to us. We believe now." Naamah placed a comforting hand on her husband's shoulder, feeling the tension there. "You did all that was commanded, husband." Their choice was made long before this moment. Nuh nodded, though anguish lined his ancient face. He raised his lantern toward the small window, allowing its light to shine outward as a final acknowledgement of those who would perish, illuminating what could have been their salvation had they heeded centuries of warning. "The time for choosing has ended," he called through the thick wooden walls. "The Creator's patience extended 950 years through my warnings. That time has passed." More desperate pounding followed, accompanied by wails of despair, as the reality of their situation finally penetrated generations of denial. The storm intensified further, rain hammering the ark's roof with such violence, the sound nearly drowned out human cries. Shem approached his father, concern evident in his expression. "Should we not secure the observation ports? The waters continue rising." "Not yet," Nuh replied softly. "Let our lantern light shine outward a few moments more, a final witness to what might have been." Through the small opening, they watched the terrible scene unfolding as judgment overtook disbelief. People who had lived as neighbors, some who had personally mocked Nuh's warnings for decades, now struggled against currents too powerful to resist. Parents held children aloft as waters reached their shoulders. Elders who had dismissed Nuh's prophecies throughout their long lives now faced mortality with new understanding in their eyes. "How quickly certainty dissolves," Nuh observed sadly, raising his lantern higher. 9 centuries they built lives on ground that now disappears beneath them. The ark shifted slightly, the first indication that water had begun lifting the massive vessel from its construction site. What had been immovable for centuries now stirred with divine purpose. "Secure all lanterns," Nuh instructed, his voice heavy with finality. "Close the observation ports. What comes next is not for human eyes to witness." As his family moved to obey, securing light sources against the motion to come, Nuh allowed himself one final look through the portal. His lantern illuminated a narrow slice of the world being unmade, people who had rejected salvation now facing judgment without remedy. "May the Creator show mercy to their souls," he whispered, before firmly securing the observation port against the rising deluge. The bronze lantern in his hand, crafted to illuminate the ark during the great darkness to come, would become one of history's most significant artifacts, preserving light while divine judgment extinguished an entire civilization outside. As the vessel began to lift more noticeably from its foundations, the lantern's flame remained steady, illuminating the preservation of life within, while chaos consumed everything without. The parchment map spread across the ark's navigation table depicted the valley in meticulous detail, villages, fields, mountains, and waterways carefully rendered by Nuh's hand over centuries of observation. Now, as water transformed the landscape below, this first flood map would document destruction rather than geography. "The lower market district has disappeared completely," reported Ham, marking the parchment with a small brush, dipped in blue pigment. "Water rises midway up the temple steps." Nuh nodded gravely, watching as his son updated the map to reflect the rapidly changing world below. Through small observation ports, they witnessed the unfolding catastrophe, an entire civilization dissolving beneath unprecedented floodwaters. "The central square where they mocked me last week now lies 3 cubits underwater," Nuh observed, his voice heavy with the knowledge that vindication brought no joy. "Mark it accordingly. The ark shifted noticeably, wooden joints creaking as water continued lifting the massive vessel. What had been firmly grounded for centuries during construction now prepared for its divine purpose, floating above judgment rather than succumbing to it. Outside, human voices still called, desperately, though fewer with each passing moment. Some had reached the hillside adjacent to the ark's construction site, temporarily escaping the rising waters, only to witness their inevitable approach. They break into the temple seeking higher ground, Shem reported from another observation port. The priests who rejected divine warning now pray to silent idols for deliverance. 9 centuries they claimed their deities controlled the weather. Nuh remarked sadly. Now they discover which god truly commands the waters. Nama appeared from the lower decks, her expression troubled. Husband, some still call your name. Begging entrance, children cry out alongside their parents. Pain crossed Nuh's ancient features. The gate was sealed by divine command, not human choice. What the Creator has closed cannot be opened by mortal hands. The map continued receiving blue markings as landmarks disappeared beneath the flood. Fields where generations had harvested grain, markets where commerce had flourished for centuries, homes where families had lived and died while rejecting prophetic warning, all gradually erased by rising water. The Elders' Council chamber is now submerged, Ham noted, adding another blue marker to the map. Those who most vehemently opposed your message were among the first to disappear beneath the water, a judgment they chose through centuries of rejection. Nuh responded, though satisfaction remained absent from his voice. Mark the eastern highlands, how quickly do waters approach there? Before Ham could answer, a tremendous pounding shook the ark's side, accompanied by desperate shouts. Through the observation port, they glimpsed a group of men attempting to breach the vessel's hull, with farming implements turned to desperate purpose. They seek to force salvation at the end, observed Shem grimly, after rejecting it freely offered for centuries. The hull will hold, Nuh assured his family. It was designed against pressures far greater than human desperation. The map received more blue markings as water claimed additional territory with unnatural speed. What might have taken months in a natural flood occurred within hours under divine judgment, the blue area expanding while inhabitable land shrank visibly. The wedding hall where celebrations continued despite your warnings now stands halfway submerged. Ham reported, updating the map accordingly. Those who danced yesterday drowned today. Nuh traced weathered fingers across the parchment, following the blue progression that matched his centuries of warning. How quickly eternity overwhelms temporary pleasure, he observed quietly. A woman's voice called from outside, closer than the others, her words clearly distinguishable despite the storm's roar. Prophet, in mercy save my children if not myself. Nuh moved to the small observation port, peering into the driving rain. A mother stood on rapidly disappearing high ground, holding 2 small children above the rising water. I mocked you, she admitted, desperation stripping away pride. I raised these children to laugh at your warnings, but they bear no responsibility for my disbelief. The ancient prophet's face reflected centuries of accumulated anguish. The gate is sealed by divine command, not human decision. I cannot open what the Creator has closed. Then take them at least. She lifted the children higher, water now reaching her shoulders. They are innocent. There is no innocence without obedience, Nuh replied sadly. The time for choosing salvation ended when the gate closed. As if punctuating his words, a massive wave surged across the remaining high ground, sweeping away the woman and her children before their final cries could be voiced. The flood map gained another blue marking, another area claimed by divine judgment. Close all observation ports, Nuh instructed heavily. What occurs now is between souls and their Creator. We have witnessed enough. As his sons moved to comply, the ark shifted more dramatically, water now lifting it clear of its construction cradle. The vessel that had been an object of mockery for centuries now fulfilled its divine purpose, rising above the judgment, consuming those who had rejected salvation. The flood map, the first documentation of divine judgment's progression, would be preserved aboard the ark as testament to prophecy fulfilled and warnings unheeded. Its blue markings recorded not just geography transformed, but the end of one chapter in human history and the preservation of life for the next. The massive wooden door of the ark, crafted from ancient cedar and sealed with pitch, represented the final boundary between salvation and judgment. As Noah stood before it, divine presence manifested as a luminous mist surrounding the entrance. 9.5 centuries of prophecy culminated in this solemn moment. The physical separation of those who believed from those who rejected divine warning. "It is time," Noah said quietly to his gathered family. "The Creator now seals what human hands built." The small group, just 8 souls from a civilization of thousands, watched in reverent silence as the glowing mist intensified around the doorframe. The last sounds from outside, desperate cries, pounding fists, and the roar of floodwaters grew muffled as divine power enacted final separation. "Will they truly all perish?" whispered Noah, her maternal heart aching despite centuries witnessing their rejection. "Even those who mock even now, the Creator judges with perfect justice," Noah replied, his ancient eyes reflecting both certainty and sorrow. 950 years they received the same warning, generation after generation, choosing disbelief. The door began moving of its own accord, massive wooden panels sliding together with supernatural precision. Through the narrowing gap, Noah caught final glimpses of the world being unmade, people clinging to rooftops as water surged through the valley, others scrambling toward higher ground that would soon disappear, some simply standing in resignation as waters claimed them. Noah whispered, searching the chaos for any sign of his unbelieving son. "My child." Shem placed a comforting hand on his father's shoulder. "He made his choice, father, as did we all." The gap narrowed further, divine light sealing the connection between the preserved and the perishing. For a moment, Noah thought he glimpsed a familiar figure in the distance. Noah standing proudly among community leaders, even as water reached their waists. The painful image seared into his memory as the door sealed completely, the luminous mist solidifying into an impenetrable barrier. "It is done," Noah pronounced, his voice heavy with finality. "What the Creator has sealed cannot be opened until divine purpose is fulfilled." The family stood in solemn silence before the sealed door, the boundary between 2 ages of human history. Outside, judgment continued its inexorable progression. Inside, the preserved remnant of humanity began their vigil. "Let us pray for those we leave behind," Noah instructed, kneeling before the sealed entrance. "Though they rejected salvation until the end, we commend their souls to divine mercy." The family joined him in prayer, their whispered supplications accompanied by the ark's creaking as floodwaters lifted it from its construction cradle. The sensation of movement, subtle at first, then increasingly pronounced, signaled the beginning of their journey above the waters of judgment. "The vessel floats," observed Ham with quiet awe. "After centuries of mockery, your prophecy proves true in all details, Father." "Truth remains truth, whether believed or rejected," Noah replied, rising slowly from prayer. "The Creator's patience extended 9 centuries through my warnings, but divine justice cannot be indefinitely delayed." A massive impact shuddered through the ark, some large debris, or perhaps a desperate final attempt to breach the hull. The sealed door held firm, divine craftsmanship, withstanding both natural force and human desperation. "They still try to enter," Shem noted, placing a protective hand against the sealed entrance. "Even now, they seek to force salvation rather than accept it freely offered. Pride persists even facing extinction," Noah observed sadly. "The same pride that rejected simple faith for 9 centuries now attempts to overpower divine judgment." The sounds outside grew increasingly chaotic. structures collapsing beneath floodwaters, human cries diminishing as waters claimed more victims, the overwhelming roar of a world being transformed through catastrophic judgment. Nuh turned from the sealed door with profound finality, facing the preserved remnant of humanity. We must attend our duties now. The animals require care. Our provisions need securing against the vessel's movement. "How long will we float above judgment?" asked one of Nuh's daughters-in-law, anxiety evident in her voice. "Until divine purpose is fulfilled," he answered simply. "Our task is faithful stewardship of what has been preserved, not questioning the timeline of restoration." Another powerful impact struck the ark, causing lanterns to sway precariously. The sealed door, the boundary between salvation and judgment, remained secure against both floodwaters and desperate final attempts at entry. "The door will not be opened again until the Creator decrees," Nuh assured his family. "What divine wisdom has sealed, human desperation cannot breach." They moved deeper into the ark's interior, leaving behind the sealed entrance that represented both divine mercy toward the faithful and judgment upon the disbelieving. The massive door, crafted according to divine specification and sealed through supernatural power, would remain closed until waters receded and judgment completed its terrible purpose. Inside the ark, 8 souls carried the future of humanity above the waters of divine judgment. Outside, an entire civilization that had rejected prophetic warning for centuries disappeared beneath unprecedented flood. The door between them, the physical boundary between salvation and judgment, stood as testament to divine justice perfectly administered after patience spanning nearly a millennium. The leather-bound journal lay open on the navigation table, its first page bearing a simple heading, "Record of the Great Waters." Nuh's weathered hand moved steadily across the parchment, documenting the initial hours of their extraordinary voyage. This captain's log would preserve for future generations the details of divine judgment and salvation, the end of one world and the preservation of another. "Day 1, he wrote carefully, the ark lifted from its cradle at midday. Waters rose with unprecedented speed, confirming divine revelation. Judgment and mercy manifested simultaneously, judgment upon disbelief persisting through 9 centuries of warning, mercy toward those who heeded prophetic voice. The massive vessel creaked and swayed as powerful currents pushed against its hull. Through the sealed observation ports, they could hear the diminishing sounds of destruction, buildings collapsing, the final cries of the perishing, all gradually replaced by the omnipresent roar of water, overcoming civilization. "The animals grow restless with the motion," Shem reported, appearing from the lower decks, particularly the larger predators. "They sense the unnatural forces surrounding us." Nuh nodded, making a notation in his captain's log. "Record which species show greatest distress. We must adapt their care accordingly." The ark lurched suddenly as some massive object, perhaps an uprooted tree or collapsed structure, struck its hull. The impact sent several containers sliding across the floor, though the vessel's divinely inspired design maintained its integrity. "The world dissolves beneath us," observed Ham, securing loose items against the increasingly violent motion. "Just as you prophesied for centuries, Father." "Not my prophecy, but divine warning," Nuh corrected gently, carefully documenting the time and intensity of the impact in his log. "I merely served as voice for revelation rejected by generations." Another powerful surge lifted the ark, causing it to spin slowly before stabilizing. The vessel that had been an object of mockery for centuries now served its divine purpose, preserving life while judgment consumed everything outside its wooden walls. "Father," Japheth called down from the upper observation deck, "the mountaintops have disappeared. Only the highest peak remains visible, and waters still rise." Nuh recorded this observation meticulously, his captain's log becoming the only historical record of a civilization disappearing beneath divine judgment. "Note the time," he instructed. "Future generations must understand both the speed and completeness of divine action when patience finally yields to justice." Throughout the ark, Animals called out in response to the vessel's erratic movement, roars, bleats, and chirps creating a strange symphony of preserved life. Nuh's family moved efficiently through the decks, tending to creatures according to their needs, fulfilling the stewardship entrusted to them. "We should gather for prayer," Nuh announced, closing his captain's log temporarily, "to offer gratitude for salvation and supplication for those who rejected it until the end." The family assembled in the ark's central chamber, kneeling together as the vessel continued its chaotic movement atop floodwaters. Nuh led them in solemn prayer, his ancient voice steady, despite the catastrophe surrounding them. "Creator of all things, we acknowledge your perfect justice and mercy. We grieve for those who rejected centuries of warning, yet we accept your divine judgment as righteous and true. Preserve us above these waters of purification, that life might begin anew, according to your purpose." As their prayers continued, a tremendous sound shook the ark, a roar beyond natural thunder, as though the very foundations of the earth shifted. The captain's log would later record this as the final opening of the deep, when underground water sources fully unleashed their contribution to global inundation. "The mountains are gone," Yafith reported upon returning to the observation deck. "Nothing remains visible but water in every direction." Nuh nodded solemnly, returning to his captain's log to document this pivotal moment. As prophesied, waters now cover the highest peaks. The world known to generations lies completely submerged. "We float alone above divine judgment, preserving life for restoration according to Creator's timeline." Nama approached her husband, her eyes reflecting both wonder at their salvation and sorrow for those lost. 9 centuries, you warned. How quickly their mockery turned to terror when waters confirmed your words. Truth remains truth, whether believed or rejected. Nuh replied, carefully recording her observation in his log. Divine patience extended 9 centuries through prophetic warning, yet justice ultimately arrives as promised. The family worked together to secure provisions shifted by the ark's movement, their coordinated efforts reflecting centuries preparing for this moment. Despite the chaos outside, a sense of divine purpose permeated their activities, each fulfilling their role in preserving life above judgment. As darkness fell on their first day afloat, Nuh made his final entry in the captain's log. Night approaches, though time loses conventional meaning in these extraordinary circumstances. We drift according to divine current rather than human navigation. The world we knew has ended. What comes next remains known only to the Creator, who both judges and preserves according to perfect wisdom. The leather-bound journal, the captain's log, documenting humanity's most consequential voyage, would become sacred text for future civilization. Its careful records preserved both the mechanics of divine judgment and the spiritual purpose behind unprecedented destruction and salvation. Within its pages, Nuh balanced factual observation with prophetic understanding, creating the definitive historical record of how one world ended and another began. A simple stone tablet rested in Nuh's hands, its smooth surface awaiting inscription. In the ark's quiet upper chamber, illuminated by gentle lamplight, he prepared to create what would become humanity's first memorial stone, a record of those lost to disbelief. His weathered finger traced the blank surface that would soon bear names representing thousands who rejected salvation until waters claimed them. "Must you document their disbelief, Father?" asked Shem, entering quietly. "Would it not be kinder to allow their rejection to dissolve with their physical remains?" Nuh looked up from the stone, his ancient eyes carrying the weight of centuries witnessing human failure. Future generations must understand both divine patience and the consequences of persistent disbelief. This memorial preserves not judgment, but warning that pride and mockery lead ultimately to destruction. Outside, water continued its uncontested dominion over what had been human civilization. The storm had calmed significantly, though rain still fell steadily. The ark floated in eerie silence, carrying the only human survivors above a drowned world. "I think most often of Nuh," Nuh confessed, his voice barely audible. "My son, who heard divine truth from his first moments, yet chose disbelief until waters filled his lungs." Shem placed a comforting hand on his father's shoulder. His choice was made freely, father. The same salvation offered to all was rejected by most, including those sharing your blood. Nasi nodded slowly, picking up a sharpened stone tool to begin inscribing the memorial. Divine justice remains perfect, even when it divides father from son. The Creator judges hearts rather than bloodlines. The first name etched into the stone was indeed Nam, son of Nuh, acknowledging that prophetic lineage offers no protection against the consequences of personal rejection. The memorial stone would become both historical record and spiritual warning for generations yet unborn. I carry his face in my memory, Nuh continued, carefully inscribing additional names. Standing proudly among community leaders even as waters reached their waists, defiant until the end, mistaking drowning for dignity. You offered salvation for 9 centuries, Shem reminded him gently. No prophet could have done more. Yet I question if I might have reached him differently, Nuh admitted, revealing the vulnerable heart beneath prophetic authority. If different words might have penetrated pride hardened through generations of communal mockery. The memorial stone continued receiving names, community leaders who had opposed prophetic warning most vehemently, scholars who had rejected divine revelation through rational argument, ordinary citizens who had followed prevailing disbelief rather than risk social ostracism through faith. The Creator judges justly, Shem affirmed, watching the growing list with solemn reverence. 9.5 centuries of patient warning preceded single day of judgment. Justice and mercy balance perfectly in divine action. Nuh agreed, continuing his careful inscription. The same waters that execute judgment upon disbelief now lift salvation for the faithful. The ark creaked and swayed gently, floating above submerged mountain peaks that had once dominated the landscape. Within its wooden walls, the preserved remnant of humanity and animal life continued their extraordinary voyage, while Nuh documented what and who had been lost. We alone remain, he observed quietly, the weight of this reality evident in his voice. 8 souls carrying humanity's future above divine judgment. An overwhelming responsibility, Shem acknowledged. To rebuild civilization according to divine principles rather than human corruption. Nuh nodded, adding another name to the memorial stone. The Creator preserves life not merely for continuation, but transformation. What emerges when waters recede must differ fundamentally from what they covered. Through small observation ports, they glimpsed occasional debris floating past, remnants of the civilization now erased from Earth. Each fragment represented lives, families, and communities that had rejected divine warning until judgment rendered choice irrelevant. I hear their voices still, Nuh confessed, pausing in his inscription, mocking during construction, pleading when waters rose, screaming as judgment claimed them. 9 centuries of the same message receiving the same rejection, generation after generation. Yet you persisted faithfully, Shem reminded him, when any other prophet might have abandoned such thankless mission. Not faithfulness but obedience, Nuh corrected gently, resuming his work on the memorial stone. Divine command sustained prophetic warning across centuries of rejection. The growing list of names represented not just individuals, but an entire world view that had placed human wisdom above divine revelation, immediate gratification above eternal consideration. The memorial stone would preserve their rejection as warning, rather than condemnation, historical record, rather than triumphant vindication. When waters recede, Nuh said thoughtfully, this memorial will stand as first marker in the new world. Future generations must understand both the patience preceding judgment and the completeness of its execution. The stone tablet, simple yet profound in purpose, would outlast even the ark itself, becoming foundation for humanity's understanding of divine justice, balanced with mercy. Its careful inscription acknowledged individual choice while documenting collective rejection spanning nearly a millennium of prophetic warning. The memorial is not punishment but testimony, Nuh explained, completing another name with reverent care. That divine patience extends beyond human comprehension, yet eventually yields to perfect justice. The single white feather rested in Nuh's weathered palm, its delicate structure catching the light filtering through the ark's small window. The storm that had raged for 40 days and 40 nights had finally subsided, leaving an eerie stillness across the submerged world. This dove's feather, left behind when the bird returned exhausted after finding no place to land, symbolized both continued judgment and emerging hope. She found nothing, Nuh explained to his gathered family, carefully placing the feather on the navigation table. Waters still cover all land, yet her return itself suggests the storm's fury has passed. The ark floated in relative stability now, no longer tossed by violent currents, but drifting upon an endless expanse of water. Through observation ports, they glimpsed only unbroken surface stretching to the horizon, in every direction, a world transformed beyond recognition. "How long will we remain adrift?" asked Japheth, the question that had begun occupying all their thoughts as days stretched into weeks, and now months. "Until divine purpose is fulfilled," Nuh replied simply. "The Creator who commanded this vessel's construction determines when its voyage concludes." Ham appeared from the lower decks, where he had been tending the increasingly restless animals. The creatures sense change approach. Many grow anxious in their confinement, as though instinctively aware land should have reappeared by now. Nuh nodded thoughtfully, stroking the dove's feather with gentle reverence. "They perceive natural cycles we cannot. Their restlessness confirms what this feather suggests. Transition approaches between judgment and restoration." For months they had maintained their floating sanctuary above divine judgment, caring for preserved life, while an entire civilization remained submerged beneath them. The ark had become their entire world, its wooden walls containing humanity's future, while the past dissolved in waters below. "When we emerge," Shim began hesitantly, "what world awaits us? Will anything remain of what existed before? The physical landscape may bear marks of judgment, Natos, and Sitsu transformation must occur in human heart rather than geography. We carry forward not just life, but responsibility for a fundamentally different civilization." The dove's feather, seemingly insignificant yet profoundly meaningful, represented their first communication with the world beyond their wooden sanctuary since the door sealed months earlier. Its return with no olive branch confirmed judgment continued, yet its very existence offered promise of eventual restoration. "I will send her again in 7 days, Nuh decided, carefully preserving the feather as both record and symbol. "Perhaps then waters will have receded enough to reveal land." Nama joined them, bringing freshly prepared food from their dwindling but still adequate provisions. "The first world existed for nearly 1,000 years during your prophetic warning," she observed. "How long might this new world endure before human corruption invites similar judgment?" The question hung heavy in the ark's confined space, the sobering acknowledgement that preservation carried no guarantee against future failure. The dove's feather trembled slightly in the gentle air currents, its fragility mirroring the precarious future they would build upon receding waters. "Divine patience extended 9 centuries before judgment fell," Nuh replied thoughtfully. "Perhaps this second opportunity carries different terms. Our responsibility lies in establishing righteousness from the beginning, rather than measuring time until its dissolution." Through observation ports, the limitless water reflected brilliant sunlight, deceptively beautiful given its catastrophic significance. Somewhere beneath that tranquil surface lay an entire civilization that had rejected prophetic warning until judgment rendered choice irrelevant. "What will we tell future generations?" Ham wondered aloud. "How will we describe what they never witnessed?" "With complete truth," Nuh answered firmly, indicating the dove's feather and other artifacts they had carefully preserved. "These physical remnants support testimony that might otherwise strain belief. The memorial stone bears names representing thousands. This feather documents our first reconnection with the world being reborn." The family fell silent, contemplating their extraordinary responsibility as sole survivors of divine judgment and seed for humanity's second opportunity. The dove's feather represented transition between these realities, the ending of catastrophic judgment and beginning of cautious restoration. We build not just physical structures when waters recede, Nuh continued, but moral foundation for civilization itself. The corruption consuming the first world must find no foothold in what follows. Shem studied the feather thoughtfully. Perhaps the dove herself becomes our model, seeking solid ground amid uncertainty, returning when necessary rather than perishing through premature hope. Nuh nodded approval at his son's insight. Wisdom begins in recognizing divine timing rather than imposing human impatience. The same Creator who sent cleansing waters determines when earth becomes habitable again. The dove's feather, preserved carefully among their most significant artifacts, would eventually symbolize humanity's second beginning. When finally the bird returned with olive branch in beak, they would know divine judgment had completed its purpose and restoration begun. One world has ended, Nuh observed, watching sunlight play across the feather's delicate structure. Another awaits our emergence when waters recede. Between judgment and restoration, we drift according to divine current rather than human navigation. The family dispersed to their various duties, maintaining their floating sanctuary, leaving Nuh alone with the dove's feather and his contemplation of transition between divine judgment and mercy. This simple artifact, easily overlooked in its ordinariness, would eventually represent humanity's first sign that catastrophe had finite limits, and restoration's certain promise. Sunlight gleamed off the polished stone tablet where Nuh carefully inscribed the final words of the covenant. This rainbow covenant, documenting divine promise never again to destroy earth through flood, represented not just conclusion to catastrophic judgment, but foundation for humanity's new beginning. Beneath the text, Nuh had etched a simple rainbow arc, reflecting the brilliant phenomenon now spanning the clearing sky. "It is done," he announced to his family gathered on the mountainside. "The Creator's promise stands established for all generations to come. Waters of judgment shall never again cover earth completely." They stood together on solid ground for the first time in over a year, the massive arc resting firmly upon Mount Jardy's peak. Around them stretched a transformed landscape, familiar geography altered beyond recognition by divine judgment. Valleys lay where mountains once stood, new waterways cut paths through terrain formerly dry. Everything bore testament to both catastrophic destruction and emerging renewal. "The earth appears reborn," observed Shem, surveying the vast panorama visible from their elevated position. "Cleansed rather than merely flooded," Nuh nodded, carefully setting the rainbow covenant stone upon a simple altar of uncut stones. Divine judgment executed not just punishment, but purification. What emerges now carries both memory of failure and opportunity for fundamentally different civilization. The ark that had preserved them through divine judgment now stood empty, its extraordinary purpose fulfilled. Animals had departed in orderly procession, instinctively seeking appropriate habitats in the transformed landscape. What had been salvation during catastrophe now became monument to both divine judgment and mercy. "What becomes of the ark itself?" asked Japheth, glancing back at the massive wooden vessel that had been their home during Earth's transformation. "It remains as testimony," Nuh replied, its physical presence confirming historical truth that future generations might otherwise dismiss as mythological. "When human pride rises again, as surely it will, the ark stands as reminder of both judgment's reality and salvation's provision." The rainbow covenant stone gleamed in sunlight, its freshly inscribed text establishing parameters for humanity's second opportunity. Unlike creation's original covenant, this one acknowledged human tendency toward corruption while establishing divine promise despite that reality. "Never again will waters cover earth completely," Nuh read from the stone. "Though human heart remains inclined toward evil from youth, divine patience extends covenant protection against total destruction." The rainbow appears as perpetual reminder, and judgment completed and mercy established. The family stood in reverent silence before this extraordinary document, divine commitment, inscribed in stone by human hand. The covenant balanced realistic acknowledgement of human failure against transcendent promise of divine restraint, creating foundation for civilization's new beginning. "We carry tremendous responsibility," Shum observed, the weight of being humanity's sole survivors evident in his voice. "Every person subsequently born descends from this moment, and our understanding of its significance." Noah placed his hand upon the rainbow covenant stone, connecting physical artifact with spiritual reality. "The responsibility lies not in perfection, but faithful witness. We teach future generations both what occurred and why, preserving truth without minimizing either judgment's severity or mercy's provision." Around them, signs of renewal already emerged from the transformed landscape. Green shoots appeared in soil freshly deposited by receding floodwaters. Birds built nests in trees that had survived by floating atop the deluge. Life reasserted itself with surprising vigor, divine creativity finding expression through natural resilience. "We begin again," Nuh declared, gesturing toward the valley below where they would establish humanity's first post-flood settlement. Not as former civilization continuing, but new creation emerging from judgment's crucible. The rainbow covenant stone would become foundation for this new beginning, its divine promise providing security against existential uncertainty, its historical record preserving accurate memory of catastrophic judgment, its moral principles establishing parameters for sustainable civilization. The world before persisted in corruption despite 9 centuries of prophetic warning. Nuh reminded them, what follows must differ fundamentally in both spiritual awareness and moral practice. As if confirming their covenant discussion, a brilliant rainbow appeared across the eastern sky, natural phenomenon, imbued with supernatural significance. Its perfect arc stretched from horizon to horizon, visible reminder of divine promise freshly inscribed upon stone. "The sign appears," Nuh observed, indicating both rainbow and covenant stone, physical manifestation of spiritual commitment. Whenever storms threaten and rainbows appear, humanity remembers both judgment executed and promise established. This simple stone tablet, bearing history's most significant divine commitment, would eventually become civilization's most sacred artifact. Its careful inscription preserved not just covenant details, but connection between natural phenomenon and supernatural promise, creating foundation for humanity's understanding of both divine justice and mercy. "We descend now to begin again," Nuh instructed, carefully lifting the rainbow covenant stone, carrying both memory of judgment and promise of protection. The Creator who cleansed earth through water now commits never to repeat that specific judgment, though human accountability remains. The family gathered their preserved artifacts, the memorial stone bearing names of the perished, the dove's feather symbolizing hope amid catastrophe, and now this rainbow covenant establishing parameters for civilization's new beginning. Together, these physical items would anchor historical memory that might otherwise dissolve across generations. "One world has ended," Nuh observed, taking his first steps down from Mount Judy toward humanity's fresh beginning. "Another now emerges through divine mercy." Between these realities stands covenant commitment, inscribed in stone and displayed in sky, perpetual reminder that both judgment and promise originate from the same divine source.